Now we are moving to the next presentation. So we welcome Mr. Amir Ben Gacem, who is a partner and in digital record digital. And it's actually the first contact, the first time I meet with Amir, and we had the first contact through LinkedIn, a digital first contact. And Amir, he has an exciting project working on, and he will share it with us. So thank you for being here, and yeah.
Thank you very much, Ziad, and thanks for everybody here. So I guess today the idea is really to talk about basically the growth needed in the digital infrastructure, and I think this is kind of the theme here. But the idea is how to link the digital revolution that we are seeing right now, be it AI and all these new technologies, with the energy transition, and basically how we can link these two key themes and how they can kind of be supportive of each other, and also how we can potentially see the business opportunities, or how we can see the the opportunities for investments in these. I'm going to try to make this work. Okay. So, technological revolution, I know it's kind of a theme that's been kind of going around for a while now. Obviously, I don't want to bore you with numbers, but if you look at just the growth of the internet, back in 2008, which seems a long time ago, but yeah, 15 years ago, only 25% of the global population on Earth had access to the internet or used the internet. Today, we went from 25% to just under 70%. So today, there's roughly 5.3 billion users of internet. This is kind of just on the internet. If you look at the data that we consume and that we produce, back in 2022, a rough estimate was that we produced roughly 100 trillion gigabytes of data that we consumed and produced, which is massive. Now, away from that key number, I think most importantly, if you look at the growth of that, back in 2018, which is again just 5 years ago, that number was around 30. So between 2018 and 2023, basically we went up threefold, which is kind of significant. And a lot of the estimates now, people talking about growth of the data, and when I say data, we're talking about storage as well as compute data, as in the management of data, will go up to 200 trillion gigabytes by 2025. What's the trigger for that? As I said, the internet is one of the themes, but the big driver has been basically the use of artificial intelligence and the IoT, so the Internet of Things. This presentation, I'm not sure what you think about the graphics, but this is AI generated. So I've prepared this presentation thanks to AI, and a lot of the graphics, I don't know if you like it or not, I think it's looking okay. A lot of the graphics came from AI generated, so you just type whatever theme, and the system will generate basically the presentation for you, which is amazing. Another thing, when people say, yeah, but AI is a very trendy word, and who cares, and maybe not as present. Well, I can tell you it is very much in the present, and this is why people need to pay attention in terms of the impact of this new technology coming into our lives. I've been touring universities in London because my son is applying for universities. And in one of the universities we went to last week, we had the head of admissions coming in and making a speech. And the head of admissions was making a very interesting point. He was warning the students not to use ChatGPT to write their cover letter for the entry in universities, because now it's a requirement for all UK universities to use this software that basically detects if someone used basically ChatGPT or any AI-generated system to write their cover letters. So any UK university now, and when I say UK university, imagine it's going to be exactly the same for HR departments in different places in Europe, to cover letter, etc., they look at potential copyright issues. So I went out of the room a little bit shaken. So I looked at my son and I said, did you hear him, right? I'm sure you're not going to use it. And my son, in a very settled way, said, Dad, don't worry. There's this other AI system that actually takes whatever you generated and makes it unpredictable, makes it non-detectable by other AI systems. So where do you stop? I think the point I'm trying to make here is that, you know, this is already present now, okay? And this is kind of just gonna explode, okay? So metaverse, all of that, basically fintech, is driving exponentially, as kind of I gave you the brief numbers, the need for two things: compute systems, so compute power, and data storage, right? And data centers, so if you look at data centers, these are basically the backbone of this new technology. This is basically where everything kind of happens. They need to adapt, and they need to adapt very fast. A few numbers. You know, we've talked about basically the growth in kind of data, but it's just kind of the new technologies. Like, just on me right now, I have 2 mobile phones. My watch is internet connected, and this is not like a fancy watch. So we're estimating that by 2025, we're going to have 75 billion worth of IoT and 5G connected devices. This is kind of a lot of data and a lot of compute power kind of needed. In terms of growth of data center, as I said, you know, a lot of, you know, this is kind of making a lot of noise. There's a lot of, as you know, the hyperscalers basically going around and buying new data center, buying new facilities. And this is kind of just starting because, to be honest, you know, the example I gave you in artificial intelligence, if you think about it, 2-3 years ago, or probably, yeah, maybe 3 years ago, it was just a trendy word. It's not like it's used in literally every single application we're seeing now. So this is kind of the start. 2 times growth by 2030 is very conservative. I've been hearing kind of 3 times growth in terms of data center capacity in the next 2 to 3 years, which is tremendous. It's huge. Now, all of this is great, but it does come at a cost, okay? So all this, you know, all the innovation part that we're seeing basically comes at a cost, and the cost, we know it, is basically CO2 emissions, okay? This is a chart I quite like, because if you look at the different industrial revolutions we've been having, so from Industry 1.0 to 2 to 3, which is basically the 1960s, the 1970s, until now, since 2010, 2012, when you have artificial intelligence and everybody has a mobile phone in their pockets to check the news, etc., it came at a cost. Now, this chart, I agree, we can have a very long debate, and it could come across as misleading because you can say, yeah, but we're producing more stuff anyways, so there is a higher degree in terms of emissions. But nevertheless, you know, if you think about data centers today, again, the backbone of the Industry 4.0, data centers represent, I mean, depends on which part of the spectrum. It's basically 3 to 4% maybe of the total energy consumption. So these are kind of, and everybody here, you know, I think when the presentation, we talked about, you know, the energy price, you know, and the energy used for data center, how as a commodity that is used to power these data centers, it's becoming more and more expensive. Well, think about it. If the data center size is going to increase by 3-folds between 2025 and 2030, then imagine kind of the carbon footprint. So it is not an option, but it's rather a kind of key requirement that we integrate renewable energy in our businesses, in the data center business, okay? Of course, there's other methods. You know, a lot of people were kind of moving to kind of the greener tech, and this is kind of a debate. I mean, this is kind of a presentation in itself in terms of adding more efficiency in the data center and the way kind of we're processing data. And kind of adding layer of efficiency, also using AI in terms of in data center, because there's a lot of dormant data. Cooling system in data centers, I mean, immersed cooling, I've kind of started discovering this like maybe a year and a half ago, and yes, it's very much science fiction, the fact that you can dip in a whole server into water, And just for people who are not very familiar with this concept. Oh, sorry, yes, you're right. Because if you dip it in water, yes, you have an explosion. So absolutely, thank you very much for liquid. So basically, if you look at the technology in liquid cooling, a standard data center in terms of energy consumption will have 50% of the energy roughly going into the servers and 50% roughly going into cooling the devices, okay? If you're using immersed cooling or liquid cooling, basically you're gonna turn the cooling part to 20% only of the energy consumption and 80% is going into the server. So a lot of efficiency there. And when it comes to energy, well, let's start with the good news. Renewable energy has never been cheaper. And I know there's like a couple of renewable energy experts here. If you look at there's some very, very good charts about renewable energy for every technology. So either hydro or wind or solar. Actually, if you look at the solar energy, and we're in a very sunny country, basically the price of solar panels in the last 6 to 7 years has dropped by 90%. This year alone, just in 2023, because of various factors about China, etc., what we're seeing is that solar panels prices, or basically the standard materials that are used to produce these solar panels, dropped by 30%. So this is becoming an extremely, extremely cheap technology in an environment, geopolitically, and I'm sure kind of everybody is aware, we're basically having control on the price of energy and on the supply of energy is extremely important. So where does this lead us? We're seeing already hyperscalers announcing some very big objectives, right? This is more or less public, so Google, Meta, which is basically the owner of Facebook, Apple, everybody's talking about 2030 for being kind of carbon neutral. If you look at in the United States of America, which hosts roughly, I'm going to say 40% of the total size of data centers on planet Earth, in the US, the biggest private off-takers of green energy are Google, Amazon, and Microsoft. So what does it tell you? They've already started kind of doing this shift within the US, okay? And this is kind of very, very important because, obviously, as you know, these are kind of very, very big names, especially Amazon, and we need to kind of follow the trend they're doing. So where does it leave us? Well, the way I see it is that it leaves us with a significant upside for emerging and frontier markets, okay? So I know what everybody's going to be saying is like, yes, but how about the latency? And you need the data center to be close to the consumer, right? This is the objective of data center. Well, if you kind of think about it a little bit, if you look at the spectrum of how quickly you want the request response to be, yes, absolutely. If I'm making a financial transaction and I'm paying by card or with my phone, you need that transaction to be strictly imminent, like in a fraction of a second. Absolutely agreed. So if I'm based in London and I'm making a payment with my phone, absolutely, I need the data center that is going to process that to be kind of very close. But if I'm going to go and ask ChatGPT to write me a poem in Arabic about the London weather, I can't be really bothered. Yes, the reply can come after 1 minute or two. If I'm doing a modeling, and now, for example, if you look at companies like BMW and Mercedes in Germany, a lot of their crash tests they do on their cars, you remember these crash tests? We see the videos of a car crashing into a wall. A lot of that is modelized. Now it's basically artificial intelligence. It's all models, and that requires a lot of compute power. So the point I'm trying to make here is that we are going to be slowly shifting from basically the dominance of data center being in the developed world. And I think, the US is 40%. I think across Europe, we're talking roughly about 20% of kind of capacity on data centers. So if you look at the disparity in terms of data centers as a technology between the developed world and emerging and frontier markets, it's one of the largest. If you compare other technologies, for example, if you compare ownership of mobile phones, the disparity is not very big now. If you go around, even in Tunisia, pretty much everyone has a mobile phone, maybe not a smartphone, but a mobile phone. So here we're going to be slowly moving because of that increasing need of more compute power and more storage and more capacity. we're going to be basically looking at, moving to places where you can get cheaper energy and places where you have a significant, upside or significant potential for renewable energy and installing these data centers nearby. What do you do with connectivity? You have the like of Starlink. I know Starlink is not good enough for a data center, but my point is, we're getting this new technology. The investment in undersea fiber optics cable is exploding. There's a very, very good website that shows you for the past 20 years how many fiber optics have been laid down. And remember, fiber optics, this is kind of speed of light, so this is kind of as good as it gets. And also, basically the fact that you have all these kind of big data centers. So United States of America by itself holds 40% of the data centers on the planet. Does it make me feel comfortable? Yeah, I mean, it's a safe country, it's a big power, absolutely. But then you're going to have to move to a need of diversifying. And we look at what happens in Europe. So this is not, the point I'm trying to make is, it's not only about having the data centers next to the consumers, but being able to put data centers in other jurisdictions and still kind of be able to service the planet worldwide. And there's a very good comparison I want to make here. If you look at the last industrial revolution, okay, what did we see in the 80s and the 90s? We saw globalization. What did that mean? We had a massive arbitrage in terms of labor cost between Europe and the rest of emerging markets. So industrials in Germany, in the UK, in France, started moving to China, to India, to Tunisia. For what reason? Before, maybe in the 1970s, if you would have asked Airbus or Renault or any of these companies to say, would you move your production line to China or to India or to Mexico, they most probably said, no, this is a dangerous country, how am I going to bring the goods, etc. Well, what happened? When the globalization happened in the 80s and the 90s, and we saw the rise of these emerging markets like in China and India and Mexico and South Africa, we had, as I said, this arbitrage where the production line went away from the consumer. So we started producing these and this mic and everything in China. And then thanks to very cheap, large container ships, so we've improved the logistics when it comes to transporting goods from the production in emerging markets and frontier markets to the consumer in Europe and the US. Well, guess what? If you can do a parallel between the Industry 3.0 and the Industry 4.0, you kind of can't get to the same parallel, okay? Now, if you speak to the hyperscalers and tell them, why don't you open one of your centers in the south of Tunisia in the desert where we can power it with renewable energy, they're going to say, are you crazy? I'm never going to do that. It's insecure. Well, it's basically the same narrative. It's the same rhetoric that these industrials were saying in the 70s and 80s before everybody moved their production to Vietnam and China. Well, now the way you have to see it is that as we moved, the data centers are presently in the US and in Europe, and there's, if you Google it, there's some fantastic maps showing that. Most probably, and I think the trend is going to be that these data centers, because of these new technologies, okay, because of the need of space, and because of this arbitrage in terms of the land use, price of energy, availability of energy, we're going to start seeing this moving from developed world to emerging markets, and it's going to have to come with, quite accelerated. What is the new large container ships that basically transport goods? It's basically fiber optics cables, okay? Fiber optics cables are the new container ships. And when you think about it, just optically, we used to consume a lot of things, like we're all consumers. But think about it, what are we consuming the most? We're consuming data. Like I wake up, I check my emails, I open my social media, look at articles. This is all kind of data, okay? So the thing we're consuming the most is data. And because of that, that's basically, and when you look at actually, even in the stock exchange, what are the most valuable companies? Well, guess what? The most valuable companies are basically data companies. It's basically Microsoft, it's Google, it's basically all these guys who are actually selling data. And this is exactly what we're trying to do at Record Digital. We're basically trying to expand within emerging markets, okay? We have already a project in Tunisia, so in the south of Tunisia that we've been working on for the past year or so. This is a project that's been listed a project of national interest. And basically, hopefully, it's going to be one of the largest green data centers in Africa. Now, I know what you're going to say, but hold on a second. Okay, you have green energy in the south, that's fantastic. What are you doing with connectivity? With connectivity, already in the south of Tunisia, we have 2 fiber optics lines coming in, one going from the station all the way to Italy, the other one going to Marseille. And basically, we're trying to replicate this model in other jurisdictions, be it Egypt, Kyrgyzstan. We already have a run on the river. We're basically opening a series of small, basically green data centers in Kyrgyzstan. And we're looking kind of at other opportunities in India and Brazil. I don't want to take too long. Basically, that's kind of the idea. But if I want you to keep in mind just one thing out of my presentation, is really look at the future or the progress of data centers in view of what's going on globally as a potential, shift from the developed world to the emerging markets and frontier markets using green energy. I'll stop it there. That's my details. Please get in touch. Thank you very much.